And welcome to the City of Highland Park Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for September 7th, 2023. Patrick, can we get a roll call, please? Here. Here.
Here.
Member Zaransky?
Here.
Member Hendrick?
Here.
Vice Chair Bay?
Here.
Chair Collins?
Here.
You have quorum.
Thank you. Have my colleagues all had an opportunity to review the minutes of the the July 20th, 2023 meeting? It's been a while.
Yes, I have.
I'll entertain a motion.
Member Yablon makes a motion to accept the minutes as drafted.
Seconded.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Are there any abstentions?
I will be abstaining. Member Hendrick abstains.
Thank you. For the members of the public, are there any items you'd wish to bring before the board this evening other than the items that are already published on the agenda? Not seeing any hands up. We have no old business this evening. That brings us to new business. The first application this evening is VAR 2023-00003. It's longer than new system? Okay. The appellant is Joseph Matushka, and I'll apologize if I got that wrong. The address is 140 Hazel Avenue. Patrick, do we have a presentation?
So, yes, application for 140 Hazel. The site location is here in the R4 zoning district in the lakefront overlay zone, so it's a little more adjacent to the lake. The applicant is Joseph Machushka, and the proposal is to construct a attached garage to the house. The house was built in 1948, so it's been positioned that way on the property for quite a while. And they're asking for 3 zoning variance reliefs, all dealing with kind of front yard setback issues. So there is a front yard setback of 40 feet, and they need relief for 16.94. An established building setback along Wincanton Lane, which is 36 feet, need 12.94 feet of relief, and there's also a subdivision building line on the property that matches the front yard setback. Here's kind of an aerial of the property. As you can see, this property fronts 3 roads, so it has 3 front yard requirements. The southern property line is a side yard. And also, if you can see to the right, there is a ravine on the property as well. So it does have quite a bit of zoning applications or restrictions. And here's just kind of a better screenshot of the ravine showing on the property. Here's some property photos. They're doing some interior work, so it's a little there's a little bit of truck blockage in the pictures. But this is where the attachment will be residing on it. It will be encroaching onto the Wincanton Lane side. If we look here on the site plan, the black box will be the addition, which is it will be encroaching 23.06 feet. The red line is since Wincanton is a private road, that is an easement line, which it is being measured from, and that is where all of the measurements are being taken from. There are no other comments. There was no public comments that we received before the meeting, and Forestry said that any tree will be handled in the application process. So just to review again, it has the 3 kind of front yard zoning variance relief requests for front yard setback, established building setback, and the subdivision building line. There was also a slight error in the order that I submitted in the agenda packet. It says it would say 16.96. It was actually supposed to be 16.94, so it's 2/100ths of a foot of a error, but I just wanted to let you know that that has been changed and is now in the order correct. And yeah.
Are there any questions for staff? Member Hendrick.
So you mentioned the private drive or the private road.
Yes.
Would it be calculated differently if it was public road? Is that why you said that?
It's just important because technically the property line is a dashed line to the left there.
But I guess with you said the setback is measured from the easement. So
Correct.
if it was a public road, would it be measured from the road?
Yes. Well, it would be measured from the property line because since this is a private road, their property is encroaching into the road, which is why.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it was public right of way, the property wouldn't be encroaching into the road because of how it would have been subdivided. But for private roads, these easements are used to get ingress and egress for the neighboring properties in the subdivision. So
just to make sure I'm understanding,
yes.
regardless of what type of road it was, we would be looking at the same amount of setback relief?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Bay.
I couldn't really tell from the picture. What is there now where they're proposing the construction? Is there impervious surface? Is there a driveway, or is it all just landscape?
So a little hard to tell, but it's just the grass area that's kind of in front of the tree here. So it would just be right here, and then it would be coming to connect to this driveway.
So it's partially paved, but not completely, or?
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you. Is the applicant here this evening? You'd like to join us and make any comments? It's up to you, sir. If you'll step up here just so that we can. If you'll please provide your name and address for the record.
My name is Joe Matuszka. I'm the owner of the.
Your address for the record.
Your legal address for the record.
My legal 6400 West 280 Niles.
Thank you. Are the other two of you going to speak this evening?
If asked, Timothy Bennett, the architect, in 1077 Deerfield Place, Highland Park.
Thank you. And sir?
Mark Matuszka, the general contractor, 6400 West Tui, Niles.
Thank you. Do you all hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Whoever would like to go first, if you just give your name for the record as you speak.
Sure. Right. Again, Tim Bennett. I believe Patrick largely covered it. I was just here, so it's available if you had further questions that were,
Would you, the burden of proof as far as meeting the variance requirements is upon the applicant. That's
Sure.
why we give you the opportunity
Right.
to.
So, again, we've, as you said, there's, and essentially 3 front yards that are on the site, reducing our buildable area on that. The backside is also a ravine, which creates further concerns with the steep slope area, as well as there being a bunch of mature trees in the back area that, if we were to try working off the back area, we'd also be upsetting those trees and having to create a new driveway off onto the hazel. Whereas, the proposed siting location allows us to use the existing drive off of the private street. Without the relief, then, the owner was only able to fit in a single-car garage onto the site, which, not, in keeping with kind of the other homes in the area. So.
Thank you.
The only reason I actually asked for a garage, that there was a 1-car garage in the house, and it was too narrow for any car. The opening was only 7 feet, so I thought the way to do it is put the garage on next to the house, and it kind of creates it doesn't create any problems on Hazel Road, because on Hazel Road we would have to bring in a new driveway, and there is a ravine right to the left of it, so I don't know how far we could go. close to the ravine and the natural thing. I mean, we're away from the main house, the main street. I'm sorry, the main tree about 20 feet. So it doesn't affect any trees. It doesn't affect any lot, or it doesn't affect any new driveway or anything. So I thought it was common sense to put it there. And in order to build a garage, if you only build a 1.5 car garage, you're not really doing anything. Most of the houses there have 2 and 3 car garages and bigger. So I thought the way to do is to do it as we asked for your permission to get. I don't know how many feet do we need? 7 feet.
It's about, 16 feet, about 10, so, yeah.
So I don't know exactly what it takes, but if you figure we don't do no damage to the lot, to the streets, or to the neighborhood.
Have you spoken with any of your neighbors or gotten feedback from them
Yes,
after you sent the notice?
Yes, they're all with me.
Thank you.
Otherwise, they would have been here. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to clarify, there's an existing structure right now that's a garage?
There was a garage that was previously converted. So it was a very small space that was not able to fit, current vehicles in it.
So there would currently be no structure to park your vehicle in?
Right.
I'm assuming this is,
Vice Chair Bay?
oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm assuming this property is being offered for sale? This is something you're
Actually, it was
developing?
supposed to be it was supposed to go to my son, and we bought it two years ago, and we've been going back and forth with the setback, and there's different situations apparently in the building department here in Highland Park with where the lot lines are, and there's different surveys apparently in the building department. I found out which don't cooperate from 1944 to 1982 or 1985 to 1962 or something like that. So it changed numerous times. That's why we had a meeting with the.
So you found conflicting, recorded, areas on what the, established setback was and where it was relative to, and
I guess
established the subdivision setback that was established was, and recorded differently. It seemed at different times and caused a little confusion.
I guess I was just curious as to whether or not your family was planning on living there, or whether you're going to be, is this a development that you're going to
We were,
sell?
and that was 2 years ago.
But not anymore?
I don't know. It depends.
Carl, it looked like you had something to say about the recordings that were, or was I misinterpreting your expression?
Well, I just was going to state that the applicant is correct. There were, it looks like it changed from one recorded subdivision to the next recorded subdivision, which caused some confusion.
Thank you.
Member Hendrick?
2 questions. The first one is probably pretty easy, but I couldn't get the answer from the drawings in the packet. How big is the garage?
How big is the garage?
Like 20 by 20 or bigger?
It's roughly, 30 by 20, about, then, so.
Okay. And I think you talked about it when you spoke, but why couldn't you put it on the other side of the house?
So on the Lake Avenue side, there's actually a ravine on the Lake Avenue side, so obviously we can go out to Lake Avenue. And it's also, because it's a steep slope area, there's further encroachment, beyond the rear yard setback. Well, it's another front yard there essentially. But also then we would have to pull an entrance off of the main street there instead of off of the private drive that we're currently off of, bending the drives.
That's also the bridge.
Yes, we'd be in proximity to that bridge, which, if there be, potential concerns about traffic study relative to the views on the bridge. And then the other concerns in the back of the house, being the front yard, there's, one mature tree that we're staying clear of. In the back, there are several.
Thank you.
Member Zuransky?
You're proposing a 2-car garage or a 3-car garage?
3-car garage.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. Member Yablon?
And is there any other place to put this garage? Like, what happens if you put it closer to the existing driveway right now?
We go back to that last one. So again, it would still be encroaching into one of the yards there. So the darker line is, the setbacks that, under the current zoning that you'd be required to maintain. So pretty much anywhere, with the exception of putting it in the ravine, would, encroach on those lines.
Member Hendrick.
What's the reason for needing a 3-car garage as opposed to a 2-car garage?
Was, owners, thought that was the appropriate consideration as for with the neighborhoods as far as relative to other properties.
Member Trushansky.
So I just want to clarify, you or none of your family members plan to reside in this house, is that correct?
I don't know. It depends how it comes out. I mean, we've been waiting. In the meantime, we bought another house, but I guess he doesn't like that too much. I don't know.
We applied for this permit roughly about.
If you'll step closer to the microphone, sir.
We applied for this permit roughly about 10 to 11 months ago and have been going through employee changes at the building department and have gotten major conflicts on what we can and can't do. And it's just gone on so long that we originally wanted to use the house for our own, but it's been so long and we've looked into other opportunities.
Yeah, in part, there was also a misunderstanding on our part as to what was being, and what was being allowed under that. And so we at no point were actually, we thought we had approval at one point, and then there was apparently a misunderstanding on our part. So.
Again.
Chair.
Yes.
May I make one comment, please?
Yes, Carl.
I just want to point one thing out. Just so the board is clear now, of course, we defer to the board on what a reasonably sized garage is. I have no comment on that. That's a matter of opinion. But I just want to point out, though, so that the buildable area on this property, so it kind of follows this line here. And then I just want to point out to the board that and I think this was already apparent in Patrick Hoffman's presentation, but this area here, there's steep slope zone on this portion of the property as well as mature trees. And again, I defer to the board as to what a reasonable sized garage is, but any type of 20 by 20 or 22 by 22 foot 2-car garage, if likely over here, would also need a variation, including possibly steep slope zone. I just wanted to be clear on that. Again, I defer to the board. It's a matter of opinion as to what a reasonably sized garage is. I just want to make sure the board's clear that just in terms of where they place a garage, anything on the east side here would, any type of reasonable 2-car garage would need some type of zoning variation.
Thank you. Member Hendrick.
But Carl, if it were a 2-car garage and one of those smaller dimensions, wouldn't the relief be less?
Yeah, so then it just depends on how it's designed and what the appropriate size is.
Okay.
And that's a matter of design and opinion as to what's reasonable. Correct, absolutely.
Thank you.
There's some geometric considerations because of where the existing entry is on the house, and angles to the lot that kind of, push the doors out a little bit further.
Yeah, I'm asking those questions because the first standard is cannot yield a reasonable return if permitted to be used only, this way. Basically, I'm paraphrasing that part. But, to me, it sounds like maybe there's an alternative, even if it's slightly smaller, to be a little bit smaller, and there would be less impervious surface, et cetera. So that's what why I'm asking that question. No. But it would lower the overall amount of relief asking.
I assume that you're doing a fair amount of other work to the house as well, so whether
Yeah,
the
there
family,
is separate burn, there is interior remodeling work, upgrading the bathrooms.
and is it fair to say that the other houses that are being developed in the area are of similar size? Most of them have 3-car garages?
You know, I did
Three,
the
four,
market analysis on that, but
3, 4, and 5 garage right next to us.
Much larger.
Much larger homes. Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I'm like the last one. I apologize.
That's okay.
So, in terms of I'm trying to just figure out in my head how much, like how wide the garage actually is, and because it's such a funky angle.
So, the parallel projection from the front wall of the house is, 33.6. Perpendicular projection from the house, from the front wall of the house.
There's an elevation in the packet.
Yeah, there are more drawings in the packet.
Sorry. So, measuring perpendicular to the front wall. No, so.
Page 17.
Yeah, pretty much from the front wall of the house out to the edge. That's about, 33 feet.
Does that help?
It does. And if you got rid of I'm feeling like I'm failing my geometry teacher right now. If you got rid of, I see like two door, like it would be 2 doors on the angled side and then 1 door on the,
Disappear.
Yeah, so closer to the house, there's a double door and then a single door at the more remote end on that.
and if you got rid of, if you just had the double door section, would you need relief?
Yes, we'd still need relief.
But significantly less?
I imagine probably like 7 to 9 feet long. I mean, part of it, if we can hold it just sort of the floor
Yeah.
plan machines. Maybe, not the site plan, but the floor plan. It's roof Go back 2 pages. Okay. Well, because the doors, are, we're kind of held to this odd angle, relative to, trying to get the depth and the slopes or anything else. And if we try to bring out this wall, and here we end up losing the rest of the windows on the front of the house. So we're held to the sort of this odd angle here, which, the doors, and their track has to come back, perpendicular to that wall. So if we just trimmed it off that section, we'd probably have to still put a little bit back there just for the track of the door, but yeah. So it wouldn't be exactly just chopping off the last part of that.
Is that, that's good?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members, you can take your seat, are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this application? Sir, if you'll come to the podium. If you will provide your name and address for the record.
Richard Becker, 595 Elm Place, Highland Park. I'm an architect in the community, formerly ZBA member for 8 years.
If you'll speak more into the microphone, thank you.
Richard Becker, I'm an architect here in Highland Park, 595 Elm Place, former 8-year member of ZBA. When I sat on ZBA, front yard additions were done only under certain circumstances because they encroach into the public right of way and they're so highly visible. So we would try to, in every case, make them as small as possible, and we would have a very high standard to that we would observe to allow them. And I think the questioning about going from a 3 to a 2 is very appropriate, and I totally support that kind of approach. I also think that when you're adding on to a house that's a orthogonal, rectangular structure like that, I think it's much more contextual to come out at a right angle and kind of observe the geometry of the house as opposed to doing it on an angle like that. And I think if they had done 3D modeling and showed that, I don't know if you guys require that anymore to like render it and actually see what it's going to look like. I think you'd find that it would be more contextual and look like it fits on the street. Just by coincidence, we were the architect for 1705, which is the neighbor that is just to the right of this house, and we put a garage addition on it like 20 years ago. So I would advocate rectangularizing it, even if they need side yard relief. Maybe it's a combination of side and front yard relief to make it comport in a more contextual way on the street. I think it would be a service to that block for sure. So just want to make that point.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, sir, could you step up for a minute? No, Mr. Beck, or not Beck, the gentleman who just spoke, the former ZBA member.
Yeah.
I was reminded, do you hereby affirm or attest that the testimony that you just gave is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing
I
but
do.
the truth? Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
No problem.
Response to the quick.
You may, sir, just for the recording, if
Oh,
you
sure.
could give.
Timothy Bennett, architect. 10
Thank you, that's fine.
If we were to go with the orthogonal, we would be kind of forced to come into the side yard area, which we were trying to avoid. As this front wall portion was largely established by, the constraints of the existing glazing there, as far as not eliminating all the glazing on the first floor on there, and trying to maintain, the existing entryway. But we did model it. I don't think that we've provided you any of the models on that. But, oh, sorry, we did do some modeling of this, but I don't believe we actually provided any models because,
Can you explain that again? Why you lost me?
Sorry. We could have just square across here unless without losing all the windows on the front of the house on the first floor. I mean, it's just that was pretty much the main thing that was driving that. But if we were to try and make it more orthogonal while maintaining that window,
But what's wrong with
this would
that?
have to be boxed out into the side yard here. And so it'd be pretty much just garage door right on top of the entryway. It would be the extent of the front of the house would just be garage doors and a entry door.
So you're doing that to avoid side yard relief, or what's the reason?
Well, part for the side, we didn't square it off to avoid the side yard relief, but we also did move and bring it up further that way to stay away from the entryway on the and also to try to maintain the windows on the front of the home.
Member Yablon.
So where's the front door? I just assumed it was by the patio, like by where that walkway is.
It's right here right now, and the only window in the front of the house is right there next to it.
Oh, what's the little path?
This path?
Yeah, that's not.
That goes into the side of the house, and there's not any type of entry or anything there. There is an old back entry here. But
Okay.
I'm not sure what drove that originally, but it's, an existing, pathway that's there that leads up to a blank wall.
You look like you have another question.
I'm sorry,
Yeah, I mean, we just left it in place and just, it's in reasonable condition, but yeah.
No, I just assumed.
I'm not sure what the original driving idea was in the original layout of the house for that, but yeah.
And then, I'm sorry to be so stuck on this, but can you go about why you didn't want to make it just a regular rectangle garage that just lined up with the house as is and?
Sure. I mean, our main concern was more on the front, trying keeping it off of the end. So if we were to just, we're going to run this line directly across, then we're right on top of the entryway with the garage doors. And we're also eliminating what there is of windows on the front of the house. If we were to draw the line out this way and square it out, then we would be coming into the side yard, which would be a different area of relief as well.
What if you just made it a parallelogram? My geometry teacher would be impressed.
Yeah.
Because you have that awkward triangle on top of the parallelogram.
Yeah, and it's that, it has to do with more, kind of the nature of the doors that, the tracks of the door, unless, and as the door comes back. So we'd end up actually having to make this come out and a little bit at a different angle, perpendicular to the front wall of the garage, for the garage door not to, run into the wall.
Member Hendrick.
But if it was a 2-car garage instead of a 3-car garage, maybe some planning like that would be easier to achieve.
Theoretically, yeah, then we'd be able to, then, if you came back at, perpendicular to that, it would still just be a matter of, how much of an intrusion there still would be. So, we're coming back, we're pretty much coming back to the same point, intrusion back on that corner. So.
Anything else? Thank you.
Sure.
I guess I will begin to my right with, is there anyone else who would like to speak this evening on this application? Not seeing any. Member Beck, what are your thoughts?
Oh, the Bears are going to have a good season. They're going to beat the Eagles.
Yeah.
So I actually think it's a fairly creative way to put this on the lot. I don't think they could do it on the north side. Obviously, they can't do it on the east side because of the steep slope. And I don't really have a problem with it being a 3-car garage because I think functionally that bay closest to the house is not usable. So I think you would need all that space just to get a usable 2-car garage. And I think would be hard to get a car into that last space. It's going to be a challenge. So I'm okay with it. I think if they tried to square it off and go into that side yard, the neighbors would probably object. It would have to be right on the property line. So I think I'm in favor of this the way it is.
Thank you. Member Zuransky?
I'm having a little bit of trouble with it. I think it's, as presented, I don't think it really quite meets the standards for hardship. I think a 2-car garage would be an easy ask, and I think I would be supportive of that. I guess I would like to hear from the rest of the board before committing to a direction, but as of right now, I don't think I would support this as presented. I would support it with a 2-car garage. I think that's more of a reasonable ask. I think it's just a lot of garage in the front yard of this house, and I think it kind of does mess with the character of the neighborhood a bit. And I think it's an interesting point about squaring it off and making it more, linear. I think that, makes sense. I know that's not for us today, but certainly 2-car garage, and I would be supportive of a side yard variation to, make it, more, architecturally pleasing, I would say. So I guess that's where I'm at this moment.
Thank you. Member Hendrick?
I'm going to have to agree with Member Zuransky. I believe it's close to meeting the standards, possibly as close as you can come without meeting it. I do agree that there is a hardship in that having the many front yards and the steep slope zone. Like, I agree that is present. My issue is the variation lives with the life of the property, not just with your project. And so when I think about 16 feet which might not sound that large to, an observer. Honestly, in my experience as a board, it's a pretty large request for what we see. I would like to see a 2-car garage. I think that's more consistent with what we've held other people to too. So I'm not comfortable granting the variations for those reasons. I think you're close to meeting the standards, but for me, not quite there yet.
Thank you. Member Trushansky.
I more or less agree with members Zaransky and Hendrick. I think that if it was a 2-car garage that was being asked, I think it would be easier to grant this particular variation. I almost feel as if the 3-car garage is being asked for simply because there's a notion that a 3-car garage might yield a greater return if this house was flipped. So I don't think I could support the 3-car garage, but would support the 2-car.
Thank you. Member Yablon.
First of all, I'm swayed by Member Beck's argument about having how hard it looks like it would be to get the car in next to the house, closest to the house. But that being said, I think if it was a more traditional 2-car garage with just a rectangle, then there wouldn't be a dead spot the same way there is now. So sorry to kind of give you all the information. But as for the ask right now, I am going to agree with my colleagues who think it's close but not quite there, that a smaller footprint would make more sense and be reasonable to me versus what we currently are seeing before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bay.
I certainly agree that if the ask was for a 2-car garage, I think it would be a no-brainer. I don't know that we should necessarily foreclose the possibility of a 3-car garage. However, I wonder if Mr. Becker hadn't spoken, if the attitude of the board would have been different in pointing out that there is a more viable option, which I'm really not sure because we don't have the renderings, we don't have the ability to compare what they're trying to do with what they could do. So I'm kind of a little bit on the fence. I think it's a reasonable request for a 3-car garage if you're putting a lot of money into a house, whether to flip it or to occupy it, if it's in keeping with the neighborhood. There's nobody here from the neighborhood to complain about it. As a matter of fact, Mr. Becker, I'm curious as to if you were here for this matter or just happened to be here. And okay, that's kind of what I thought. Okay, all right. So yeah, I would need more information and to see renderings to see whether I think a 3-car garage would be the appropriate ask. As of right now, I can't say that it is, so I don't think the burden's been met by the petitioner.
Thank you. I will keep this short. I am in agreement with 5 of my colleagues that I don't believe that these standards for the variations have been met. With regards to the, as Member Zaransky stated, the character of the neighborhood, I think this front yard addition overwhelms the remainder of the house from what I can tell from what was provided as well as what was discussed. I don't believe that I believe a reasonable return could be achieved without a 3-car garage. We have discussed numerous times on this board, the needs for 2-car garages, and oftentimes we have agreed to those requests because those applicants have proven that they have met the standards. In this instance, I don't believe the reasonable return piece has been met, nor do I believe that, and it comes down to, I think, a 3-car garage then also with regards to the second standard is more of a convenience to the applicant than it is a must-have, should-have in the Highland Park community and the Northern Illinois climate, as we've discussed previously. I do believe the hardship has been met with regards to, the topography, the land, the fact you've got a steep slope zone, the unusual nature of the plot because you've got 3 sides, a peninsula, a lot more or less, which is difficult. And that you have explored other options. We, appreciate that you've explored, and explained why you couldn't build this garage elsewhere and what difficulties you would have or would need to be before us for other types of variations. And with regards to the others, we haven't heard anyone claiming it's affecting their property, their light, their water, whatever. So at this time, you've heard from the board. We can vote tonight, or you could, if you wish, request a continuance to a date certain to come back with changes to this plan. It is up to you, sir. And you can discuss for a minute if you would like. If you'll come to the microphone, sir.
If you think about a two-car garage, if you shrink it down to a two-car garage, the entrance is right there. It's a little square over there. That's the entrance to the house. Okay. If you shrink that down to a two-car garage, you can only use one spot. That's actually the purpose of going to a three-car garage, because actually the part of the garage the closest to the house is almost not usable for a car. And I figured you can use it for lawnmower, for snowblower, whichever. Okay, but if you think about it, a two garage in that angle, how are you going to pull in right next to the entrance door into the garage? And then possibly a two and a half garage would work, but a two garage is almost not possible to use.
Okay, sir. Well, the option right now, you've heard what we've all thought. We can either vote this evening on it, or if you wish to come back with either other information that will help us and show us that you meet the standard, we can do that, or you could come back with a change in your plan. So
that's the only idea I have. It's almost not possible to pull into that spot next to the house. If you drive from the front, right, we have to go right next to the entrance. So two-car garage, if it's an oversized, so you have enough space to pull two cars in, possibly that could possibly work.
Member Zaransky has a question.
If that's the case, would it be worth you considering, making it more parallel to or perpendicular to the house, like squaring it off so it's not a funny shape, and that way you can get in 2 cars easily?
We can't do it because we don't have enough room to build a school. No one wants to.
One other issue that created by trying to square
just
this
for the record, just so that they know who's speaking on the recording.
Sorry, Tim Bennett. Another concern with squaring it off is that right now the drainage is right now we're putting down the side back to the end there. So if we square this off, then we're also going to be relying on having the drainage run across the neighboring property.
And the neighbor doesn't want us.
Well, I just do not want to run your drainage across the neighboring property. Yeah, so if this was squared off and cutting into this, the side yard area here, just here, the fairly tight area within, just trying to get the drainage in there. Yeah, just as far as trying to square that off in order to make that first space more usable.
I will entertain a motion, if anyone would like to make one.
I don't know that we got the question, at least I didn't get the question answered.
We did not get the question answered.
Do you want us to vote now, or do you want to ask for a continuance to present further evidence or change your plans? That's really the question. You have to decide whether you want a continuance or not.
Continue, we'll bring it back in a slightly different alternative.
Okay, in that case, I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make a motion to, okay. I'd make a motion to continue this matter. Do you want the next available meeting, or do you want more time?
In 2 weeks.
21st.
Otherwise, you have to start this all over again.
I'm sorry, do you want the next available meeting? Do you want, okay, would you want the next available meeting? Do you want a little bit more time?
The 21st?
In 2 weeks.
2 weeks, or the first Thursday in October would be the one after that. Okay,
I'd make a motion to continue this until the next available meeting in 2 weeks, which I believe would be the 21st of September.
that's correct.
Member Hendrick would second that.
All those, I guess we'll do a roll call. Patrick?
Member Trushansky.
Aye.
Member Beck.
Aye.
Member Yvonne.
Aye.
Member Zaransky.
Aye.
Member Hendrick.
Aye.
Vice Chair Bay.
Aye.
Chair Calvin.
Aye. Thank you.
See you in 2 weeks.
We will see you on the 21st. Carl or Patrick will follow up if there's more information you want to submit for the packet for that meeting.
Right.
Okay?
So just to
Thank
be
you.
clear, there will be no new mail notice for this application. It's been continued to a date certain, 2 weeks from today, Thursday, September 21st at 7:30 PM at City Hall here.
Thank you.
Thank you. If anyone was here for that. I just-
That brings us to the second item on our agenda this evening. That is 2023-VAR-013, the property at 370 Beach Street. The appellants are Chris and Megan Salamancic. Patrick, are you presenting this one?
Yep. Okay. So 370 Beach is in the R5 district neighboring R4 and R6, and is next to the steep slope zone. The applicants, Chris and Megan Salamancic, are proposing to place a parking pad within the required front yard setback for parking pad placement. The existing home was built in 1953 and is a historic landmark, as which was denoted in 1896 or 1986. This, for your reference, is a copier referral from City Council. There are additional reliefs for this project, but the City Council wanted the ZBA's recommendation on the following code section, which is the encroachment of the parking pad into the required front yard and the dense landscaping buffer. Just for your reference, the other cases which only City Council can vote upon are Section 93, which have to do with the driveway width at the property line, and the parking pad encroaches into the right-of-way across the property line. So those are just be holistic with what the entire project is. So here's a aerial of the site. Just seeing that there is the steep slope zone and the new underground garage. Just another shot of the steep slope zone off to the side here, and just kind of the angle of the house, that kind of how the house faces the front of the street. Here are some just existing photos of kind of what they're proposing, what they want. Essentially, where the parking pad would be is currently where this car is parked. Off to the side, it's off to the left of the new underground garage. Well, it was built in 2015. And here's just another existing shot. So the site plan, the proposal, the shaded gray area is the parking pad that they are proposing. As you can see, it's kind of crossing over the property line. But since you are, for the comprehensive referral, your only request is whether they can encroach into the front yard setback, and they also need relief from the vegetation buffer. Generally, if they need 10 feet and a dense vegetation buffer for that code section. Not the easiest thing to see, but these are measurements that kind of denote how wide the driveway will be, because it's connecting to the existing driveway and the parking pad. At the property line, it'll be 31 feet 11 inches, and then it's showing that it'll be 5 feet into the right of way. Forestry had no comments. If this is approved or moves down the line, that is when they will work with tree applications. Engineering had a few. The blue chip pathway is acceptable. Obviously, the park stall goes beyond the right of way, which engineering and public works works with, and so they the special license does not allow parking in the right of way. So that's why they will be going to city council further down the road for those requests. And also that there's a bridge project just north of the property that is going to be working on, and engineering just kind of wanted to comment and make note of that project happening. Public comment, we did receive a public comment that was attached to the agenda packet, which you can read, and we are here today, so we will be hearing from them later. But we didn't receive any other comments on the property. So just for your review, today you're just being asked for a recommendation that we can forward to City Council. Staff can write a findings of fact on your behalf, or if more discussion needs to be had, we can continue the next meeting with a drafted findings of fact for your approval. Those are just options that we can take. So yes, that is the case for 370 Beach.
Member Tereshansky.
Did the applicants build the garage parking?
Yes.
The underground parking garage?
Yes, they did. That went through historic preservation, and they got a certificate of appropriateness in 2015. But yes, they are the applicants are the ones who.
Yeah.
Carl, I believe this went through the ZBA as well.
Yes, this did come to the Zoning Board of Appeals, 2018, 2019, something like that.
Am I the only one who was here for it?
Received,
I may have been, but I don't
received
remember.
front yard relief.
Okay, I was just refreshing. Vice Chair Bay and I may be the only ones on the board who were here then.
And I'm old, so I don't remember it.
May I make a comment as well, Chair?
Yes.
Can I have the pointer? I just wanted to make two comments. So on this slide, so the parking pad is approximately this right here. And this dash line is the property line. And I'll just point out, it says 16 feet in width. Am I reading that right? Yes.
Correct, yes.
And then 21.33 feet in projection. I just want to point out that that's the dimensions that are proposed for the parking pad. And then the only other thing I wanted to say is just general comment. So about parking and parking in a front yard in the city of Highland Park for a single family home, because I don't think the Zoning Board of Appeals gets many, if any, variations for this type of request. This is an Article 8 of the zoning code. So in Article 8 of the zoning code, the way the city zoning code is written, if you're in an R6 or R7 zoning district, those tend to be smaller properties, though not always. You don't have any setback requirement for parking in the front street, but you still have to meet this dense vegetative requirement. Dense is not defined, that's another thing. But if you're in any other zoning district, single-family zoning district, R1 through R5, which tend to be I don't like to use vague terms, but larger than R6 and R7, that you have to meet a 10-foot setback, and then the parking facility can begin. And then, of course, there also has to be that screening. I just wanted to give that background on the zoning code and the off-street parking requirements. That's all I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice Chair Bay.
Just for clarification, and Carl almost cleaned it up for me, the words dense vegetation buffer are part of the zoning code.
Yes.
And therefore, the same zoning standards should be used to determine whether or not you can get relief from a dense vegetation buffer.
That's correct.
Yes.
I just wanted to state that it doesn't actually define what dense means. In the landscaping section of code, which does not apply to single family, it applies to multifamily and commercial developments, it gives us all the ways to calculate how many shrubs and ornamental trees are needed, and this it just says dense. So as a matter of practice, when this just comes in over the counter, if they identify landscaping, it's generally considered appropriate since it's not defined. I just want to give that context and background to the zoning board of.
Well, grass is very dense.
Well, it has to be. It does say deciduous, or well, I don't have the words in front of me,
Okay.
but it says a combination, I believe, of deciduous or all evergreen shrubs and trees, is I believe is what it's.
Okay.
I'm paraphrasing though. I can look it up if I need to.
No, that's fine. Any other questions for staff? Not hearing any. Would the applicant like to approach the rostrum? If you'll provide your name and address for the record.
Senior landscape architect Ian Wagon, representing our client, and address is 1138 West Montclair, Glendale, Wisconsin.
Do you hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
I do want to clarify, and Carl, maybe you can kind of fill this in, but I believe the 10-foot vegetative setback is from the property line and not from the roadway, which was part of the issue that we had with a previous member of the staff that we were working with when we started the project 2 years ago, is we presented them preliminary plans and they said the buffer looks good. There is dense pleasant vegetation that was just planted in the last 3 years along that roadway between the proposed parking pad and the road. So it's not wide open to the public. There's dense hawthorns planted all the way along, and you can actually see where it says the 2-inch, and you see those circles between the pad. Those are all freshly planted trees that have been planted under the assumption that we were meeting village code at that time. We did not find out that this was part of the variation until starting this process. So I do think that plays a significant factor. The other reason that we took this approach to this property is there's a lot of old-growth oak trees on the property, and in order to, can you put up the close-up that shows the triangle of the, yep, right here. So if you see that 5'2", that little shaded triangle, that is where a back tire of a car could end up being parked in the right-of-way, based on our conversation. So that's really the area of concern, based on my understanding of the review. And if we pushed the pad forward for that extra 5 feet, we would need to lose 2 pretty significant oak trees of over 20 inches that the client has invested in keeping alive. Part of this installation is root injections and an arborist doing tree pruning, so that is a key part of trying to minimize the impact on the property, because previously there was a driveway that went all the way into the backyard. For those who are familiar with the home, we are trying to recreate that, but in a less destructive way for the existing trees and property.
Thank you. You may, certainly, sir. I was going to ask if his client would like, I'm assuming you're the client?
Yes.
And if you'll provide your name and address for the record.
So it's Chris Salamasic, 370 Beach Street. We were the prior applicants on the zoning board application, so if you guys have any questions on what that variance was, I'm happy to answer that.
If you'll, do you hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to clarify a couple of inaccurate statements in one of the letters that was part of the package. One was there was a reference to concrete being used on the surface. We are intentionally using these paver stones for the surface. There's existing wood chips in place where we are parking our vehicles there. And we thought this was a more empathetic way to create a permanent surface that we can park on. So I just want to clarify that it's not additional concrete on the property. The second thing I want to clarify is the existing landscape buffer that Ian referenced. So we have planted large trees, 6 to 8 foot apiece, that are evergreens, so they provide full year-round coverage. Those trees do need space to be able to grow over time and to get light so that they can get larger and provide more screening. So the intent has been there. I will also note that, unfortunately, there was a relatively mature maple that was right here, so like right at the curb cut of the property up until maybe 12 months ago. That was in the right-of-way, and the city had to remove it because it rotted. So it was marked as part of their regular tree removal efforts. Maybe 2 other comments. So I think there was also reference to street parking on Beach Street or Wade, to park in either of those 2 spots. So on the side of the street that the house is located, there is a no parking zone. There's also a bridge. The opposite side of the street, so the north side of the street, has a fire hydrant, has a small area that you could park that's directly across from our driveway, so it does make it very difficult to get in and out of the driveway. You've also got Beach Lane, so there's a exit and entrance for approximately 10 to probably 10 homes. I don't know if you have, yeah, so maybe to lay it out. So there's the exit here. So there's cars coming in and out 24/7 there. There's a fire hydrant at that curve in the sidewalk up at the top of the page. And then all the way to the right of the driveway there on this side of the street is all no parking. So to park, to come to our home, you have maybe 2 car slots that you can park right before the that side. This neighbor has a U-shaped drive, so it's also very difficult to park in any of those locations. And then you have a stop sign here. So you're either parking in the limited space that's there directly across from the drive, or you're parking over here on Wade Street, which requires to cross at least 2 streets to get to the street parking, which I don't. You can make an opinion decision as to whether or not that's a hardship. I think the last thing we'd mention is we hear the reasonable return standard regularly used. I think it would be very unusual to not have any street legal parking, street level parking at a home in the zoning code.
Any questions for Member Trushansky?
So the purpose of the parking pad would be so that visitors could park on your property?
So visitors can park on our property, and there is no, to be clear, there is no ability to park on the property in a legal parking spot today that doesn't block access to or from the home, either the garage or walking up to the house.
So somebody could park in the driveway leading to the garage, right?
They can, but you can't get in or out of the garage, and it also blocks any access to the home other than a small unpaved section by foot. So to be clear, for the last 4 years, as we've been waiting to put the landscaping in, it turns into a mud pit for delivery drivers, UPS, childcare, everybody that comes in and out of the property. There's no paved access to and from the house at street level, which, to be honest, it's not something, when we applied for the initial garage that we put underground, it's not something that we, our architect, contractor, or the zoning board, we just missed it. So it's kind of where we're at, unfortunately.
Well, it's not for the zoning board to find a resolution to a problem that you created. We didn't miss anything because it wasn't presented to us.
And I'm not saying you did,
Okay,
but again,
you implied that we did.
No, but I am stating that I want to make clear that we did not put a garage on our property with the intent of limiting egress to and from the property. And also, to be clear, the garage was put there because the former garage was to the right of the front door. And we can go back to the original application, but the whole intent was to open up the front of the home so that people could see the front of the home, given the architectural significance. The original garage that was there, that we removed, was a 2-car garage that was added sometime after the home was built, within probably 20, 30 years post. And so it was not part of the historic preservation. It was rotting. It was actually falling in. The roof was not functional at the point we took it down. We were trying to preserve as many trees on the property as we could, on top of the fact that we had no basement. All of our mechanicals were in our kitchen, so heating, ventilation, boilers, laundry, all were in the middle of our kitchen. So there was a lot more rationale to why we put the garage where we did, and sort of the whole structure that we did when we did.
No, I remember this application very well, and I enjoyed reading it the other day. Member Hendrick.
So you mentioned it yourself, and so I just want to get straight to the point. You know, one of the standards, the second standard, gets to you can't just merely be for convenience. And you mentioned the mud and some other things that, you know, I think do go to show that maybe it's more than just a convenience. But you did mention there is some amount of street parking, even if it's limited and even if it's in a few spots. How much parking do you need? Like, why is I mean, that's what I'm struggling with, is between what you have already and the street parking available, it seems like there's enough offerings where the need for more, the additional, is what is the convenience to me. And I'm having a hard time understanding how it's not a convenience.
We do not have street level parking that is legal on the property today.
Can I clarify that for a second, Ian Wagon?
Yes.
One of the things that we've noticed since the approval and installation of the underground parking garage is that those the concrete retaining walls that hold everything out to get under the garage restricts people from parking in that downward slope where you're going underneath. So the only available parking without going all the way under the house, so if you're a contractor or you're a delivery driver or whatever, the only place you can park right now is currently in the right-of-way before you hit the concrete retaining walls at the property line. So if any one car pulls into the property, either they have to go all the way down underneath the car, in which case if it's a delivery truck, it can't fit. If it's a contractor who needs to move materials, it cannot fit. There you go. The width of the concrete makes it almost impossible if you're working on the house or moving product on the house or doing anything around the house to park anywhere but on that apron, which again would violate the right-of-way parking rules. So the easiest solution that we could find to give parking, because again, if one car parks anywhere on that concrete, the entire property is basically locked.
On the property. But
No,
I'm saying on the
it's in the
right-of-way.
right-of-way.
But on the street, you said yourself, there is parking available.
Let's go back to I want to go back to the layout because it is actually not safe parking. We have 4 small children. There are cars that drive very fast up and down Beach.
But wouldn't your car be in the garage?
Yeah, our car does go in the garage, but we have childcare and we have a lot of other people that come to and from. So I want to be clear. There's a driveway here. There's a driveway here. There may be a ability to park here. Sorry, that's way easier than this. So if you look right here, there's a driveway here, and there's no building. There's maybe space to park here, but then you are directly across from exit off. Approximately 10 homes down Beach Lane. This is a single lane exit and entrance. So it's often that one car's coming out, one car's going in. It's a volley for who goes first and who goes last. So parking here is not safe. There is a no parking sign on the entirety past our driveway. And there's a bridge past the parking sign. On the opposite side of the street, you have to be a certain distance, I don't know what the code is, from a bridge. There's also a fire hydrant right here. And so at best, you may be able to park somewhere between where the fire hydrant distance ends and the beach lane exit is here. I also want to be clear that we've had a neighbor who has harassed us on multiple occasions for parking on that side of the street. It also requires us to walk across the street if we have children with us, again, whether it's ours or it's somebody visiting. That's sort of the background.
I appreciate you walking me through that. And just, Chair, if I can ask one more question? Yeah. So let's say I get there and I agree that's not a convenience. I think other people have alluded to this. There's a standard that we have that says the alleged hardship has not been created by any person presently having proprietary interest in the subject property. As you've said, you guys put in that garage, you had the ability to design it, and theoretically someone was responsible for doing the due diligence on issues like this. So how do we get around that standard?
I don't know, honestly. And to be honest, I think we had similar disagreement. We weren't disagreeing with it, but I think there was lack of clarification around the zoning code when Ian went to apply for our most recent build here in terms of how this applied. And I guess maybe to even emphasize more, I would say the zoning code is written in a way I can understand curb cut and the width on the curb cuts. I think when I read the zoning code, you think, oh, you don't want a curb cut that's beyond a certain amount. Frankly speaking, it's not something that we tied to the setback and the setback requirement, and having, maybe you could go back to the layout of where it is again. The issue, again, is no matter what you do to be able to pull off of the main driveway, there is no ability to do so without having to be in the right of way. And part of the issue as well is we were working with a very tight driveway at the time because of mature trees over here, mature oaks. We had the maple, which unfortunately was lost over here. And we had oaks back here as well. So we were trying to work as tightly within the footprint that we had from a driveway perspective. I'll also make one other comment, which is the original architecture of the house did have the drive coming up here, and it came straight onto the property, and it actually wrapped around and went the whole way around the house. So a big piece of what we're trying to preserve is that original pathway that goes back to that garage building structure that's in the back of the home, so that in the future, if somebody wanted to put a antique car, whatever it be, they could do so. To be honest, I don't know if that's even possible today because of some of the mature oaks that have grown over time. We're not touching trees to do that, but we do want to preserve the look and the feel that was the intent of the original property there.
I believe I remember your wife saying she banged a car going back that way.
I backed a truck into it. So
I knew it was one of you.
I think you could maybe get a very small vintage car back there, but not anything sizable.
I appreciate all your responses. Thank you.
Vice Chair Bay.
I'm still trying to get clear on this exactly. If I'm understanding correctly, what you're proposing to pave using those brick pavers, is you are currently using as parking when you can, when it's not a mud pit, and that, so a delivery truck might come and pull up in there, and including the part that would actually be protruding in, excuse me, into the city right away. So people are parking there now.
Correct.
When it's parkable.
Correct. Yeah. Right now it has a wood chip base, which I refresh it every year or two as it gets muddy, which isn't ideal, and it's also not end level either.
Any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there members of the public who once they've seated, if you'd like to line up at the podium. Whoever's going to go first. If you'll provide your name and address and speak into the microphone, please.
Well, my name is Joyce Berlinski, 375 Beach Street, which is directly across the street from the subject property.
Thank you. Do you hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes, ma'am. The floor is yours.
Okay. We prepared a written objection to the application, and I don't know that you want me to.
That was in the packet, if I remember correctly?
It was in the agenda packet, and it explained why we felt that the standards for granting a variance weren't met.
Okay. You may elaborate on it. You don't need to read it verbatim.
Okay, we felt that the decision to put in an underground garage necessitates using that underground garage, and oftentimes the car that is parked up on the wood chips belongs to the applicant. Sometimes one, sometimes both cars are out there. We feel that it may be more convenient and a matter of convenience, but it's not a hardship. We have guests who park on the street. The people who live on the lane have guests that park on the street, so the notion that there isn't street parking available is, we just don't believe that that's the case. It's inaccurate. We think that if there is a hardship, which we don't believe there is, but if there's a hardship, it was self-created. There was no requirement to put in an underground garage. If surface parking was desired, could have rebuilt a garage on the surface or found some other alternative, but that wasn't the alternative that was chosen. And so whatever inconvenience or hardship there may be, it was caused by the applicants. And therefore, I think relief should not be available. There's a requirement that the proposed variation will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And I think if you look at the photographs that were presented, there is nothing in our neighborhood that would allow for both underground parking and a surface lot. We were not told, we were told that concrete was possible. There was no limitation in any of the materials that said it was going to be brick pavers, and there's no requirement that that's what it be. And we think that it creates just a very unattractive look. It makes it look, the aesthetics are, it looks like a multifamily home as opposed to a single-family home, or a surface parking lot you would find in a strip shopping center. We look directly across to that property every waking hour. Every one of our front windows looks out on the property. I don't know if you visited the property, but the notion that there's dense landscaping now that covers the cars, I think that's an inaccurate statement as well. There is no dense landscaping. We do see the cars. You can't miss the cars. And, we find that we think there's no basis for relief here under your zoning ordinance.
Thank you, sir. Are you going to make a comment?
I am.
If you'll provide your name and address for the record as well.
I'm Jay Berlinski. I live at 375 Beach.
You hereby affirm or attest that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do. If you look at the documents that were submitted in connection with the application for the underground garage, it shows landscaping on the balance of the property. It emphasizes that there will be uniform, consistent landscaping on the balance of the property. I would urge you to look at those documents that were submitted. What is proposed is bears no resemblance whatsoever to what was submitted to you at the time that the underground garage was proposed. Also, I would tell you that there is nothing in the neighborhood that is remotely like what is proposed. Not remotely. I have no further. There is an abundance of parking. Everybody on our lane has guests who find parking. We have guests. They find parking. There's parking on Wade Street, which is 25 yards away. Convenience is not a criteria for a variance. Hardship is a criteria, and hardship that is self-created is not a valid explanation.
Thank you.
I'd also, Joyce Berlinski again, I'd also
Yes,
like
ma'am.
to add, I do have the original certificate of appropriateness that was, we put in a FOIA request and we received it after we submitted our objection. And if you look at the renderings that were submitted at the time, I think you will find that what was constructed doesn't comport with what's in the in the renderings. In addition to which, the architect who submitted this for the certificate of appropriateness on behalf of the applicant said that the garage will be entirely underground, below grade, such that the area will not be visible from the exterior. The area above grade will consist of new landscaping / lawn, such that the overall impact should be neutral / positive to the overall visual aesthetic from the street. And I just don't see that happened. I'm happy to pass these out if you think it would be helpful to have.
You may submit it for the record, but it probably already is within the city.
I got it from the city,
Right.
so, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Member Beck.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you look at the picture that's up there right now, maybe the one that has the 2 cars in it already. That's the current situation that they can continue with without doing anything. Is that preferable to you rather than having a single parking pad that they're requesting and having the zoning board or the city enforce them putting the additional vegetation that they were originally supposed to do?
I don't think that I'm not sure that the parking that they're doing now is legal. So,
I don't
they
believe
may be,
that either.
okay, but they may be doing it, but I'm not sure it is legal. I had a conversation.
Say it is, because they're doing it, no one's come by and ticketed them. What is your preference? Would you prefer the current situation where they have all this wood chips, or would you prefer a landscaped single parking pad?
I'd have to see the landscaping plan and a rendering that would be up before I could answer that question.
That's fair.
Any other questions?
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
In order to obtain a variance, must qualify. It's not a question of whether we would prefer this evil or that evil. It's a question that the applicant has to be eligible for the variance.
I understand that. We've discussed that issue as well.
I
I'm asking I'm asking your opinion about
Yeah, I'd have.
what they're proposing and what you're seeing currently.
I haven't seen any landscaping. They haven't proposed any landscaping. They proposed to get a waiver from any further landscaping requirements. Correct me if I'm wrong, Patrick. I think that's the case, yes?
Well, Carl, do you want to, it sounded, looked like you were about to jump in.
Oh, no, I just, if you wanted staff to answer.
Yes, please. Patrick or Carl?
What was the question again?
The question is whether or not they have
Put in a waiver for vegetation.
From the landscaping requirement.
put in a waiver from landscaping requirements.
Well, yeah, my understanding is the variation is twofold. It's a variation to that single section. It's a variation to that single section of code, which has 2 requirements: a 10-foot setback for the parking pad, and then, again, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me, dense vegetation requirement.
Thank you.
But it's one section of code.
Right.
There's no burden to attach a landscape plan to an order or anything, correct?
No, because the variation would be getting rid of
of the requirement.
Can you, Carl and Patrick, I don't mean to bypass you, but Carl, could you just remind everyone, since this is a Campari referral, just refresh our memories on what that means?
Oh, so this, Patrick, you can correct me if I'm wrong as well here. So the applicant has asked for, what's the right way to phrase this? Well, yeah, I think relief is the right word. The applicant has requested 3 sections of relief from city code. 2 of those sections come from chapter 93. The city council has authority over that. And then 1 section is in the zoning code, the section in Article 8 of the off-street parking requirements, which the zoning board is not authorized to consider except for under that 13th enumerated allowance, which is if the city council sends it to the zoning board of appeals, and in this case, the city council has sent this to the zoning board of appeals to make a recommendation. And so it will go back to the city council at some point in time, depending on how many meetings the zoning board needs to make.
So the zoning board is not granting a variation or not. We are purely making a recommendation to city council, which may grant a variance.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, just so that everyone understands.
City council didn't want ZBA to approve or deny this variation.
Correct, they just wished for us to
wanted
make a
to be-
recommendation.
Correct.
Sir, we'll let you.
Yeah, just to clarify, Ian Wagon, landscape architect. The client has invested a significant amount in doing landscaping. We've been working on the property for the last year and a half, planting new oak trees, new quaking aspen trees. I mean, they've put in a significant investment. Most of the trees you see here in this picture are brand new. The only request we're asking for a waiver from is that 10-foot buffer beyond the property line, which we can't do because the parking pad is in the property line. We're asking that the buffer that we've already installed between the road and the parking pad, which again is overlapping 8 to 9 foot hawthorns, making a border that will grow together to block this parking pad year round. That is the relief that we're asking for. You can see these. All of these trees were planted, and again, the miscommunication we had with the village when we initially approached this project 2 years ago was that this 10 feet was the buffer, not an additional 10 feet beyond the property line as what is considered the buffer now that we understand by the village. So it's not that there's no landscaping, we're not asking to not install landscaping, and again, driving through the neighborhood within a 2-block radius, you can find 15 properties, and we provided those addresses with our application that display something similar because there just isn't the depth to have the property line and then another 10 feet before there's a parking pad or egress from a garage. You can't wall off an entire road. There's always going to be visibility from where you pull your car in. So I just want to make sure there is a landscape plan. That landscape plan is available if you would like that landscape plan, but I don't think it is what is under consideration here. It's that how you define that 10-foot privacy buffer, which is at issue.
Member Beck?
Question? Trees with a long trunk to me, don't seem to form a barrier so that you can't
Correct.
see I mean, what
It's
vegetation is going to be at the down? I can't really see.
These trees here, these
are
the brand new ones. These are the old growth trees that we are trying to preserve on the property. These are supplemented in between those to create that buffer, and they go from this driveway entrance all the way down to the bridge.
And how long will it take for those to grow together and create a barrier?
It depends. I mean, the location is not ideal as it's right next to the road, so there's going to be salt spray, which is why these particular trees were selected, and they'll grow probably, 6 inches to a foot a year. They'll grow wider than they grow tall, but you can't get landscape plants bigger than this now because in the last 2 years, the entire nursery industry has churned through all of their plant material to keep up with demand during the pandemic. So I don't know what else you could do other than
fence,
which would be illegal because it would be in the right of way on the city property.
Okay.
Any other questions? Is there anyone else? If you, Member Yablon?
I just have I guess a general question, which is, including this 10-foot buffer, can anyone in Highland Park park on their lawn? Is that, like, if you're...
So if your driveway went back, let's say your garage is behind your house and you had to access that garage and you had a party and people parked their cars down that garage almost all the way to the street to your apron, technically, if any part of that is in the right of way, that would be illegal. It doesn't matter if it's lawn, driveway, or anything based on my understanding of the code.
And
I don't think there's a law that says you can't park on your grass.
Actually, I think in the front yard, there are restrictions on it. I mean, it varies by municipality, so.
Isn't this the front yard?
Yeah, we would have to probably ask Hart that question.
Chair, would you like me to respond?
Carl?
New
Yes,
new parking facilities have to be improved. It's actually, again, I don't have it memorized, but I can pull it up. It's actually a short section. It's in chapter 93 as well. I think it's chapter 93.270 or something. I don't know how that applies retroactively or to pre-existing spaces, but new spaces have to be improved. They can't be loose aggregate, or they can't be grass. They have to be improved with some type of surfacing. I can pull a section up here.
Gotcha. So you
It's
have
93 to. Oh, it's right here. Well, actually, what it says is it says this. It says loose aggregate material prohibited. No gravel or other loose aggregate material of any kind shall be permitted on the surface of any driveway, approach, or off-street parking or loading or facility, except for temporary driveways and driveway approaches. I guess it's just a prohibition against loose aggregate.
That would be on new driveways.
Correct. So I guess that's the code requirement. I'm glad I pulled it up and read it. So, thank you.
Sir?
Chris Salamasic, 370 Beach Street. I just want to clarify a couple of things. So to be clear, we want as much screening as possible as well. We don't want to see the street. We don't want people to see our homes. We don't want people walking by, watching our children, doing anything like that. So that is why we've pursued a lot of the screening we did. There are 8 Canadian hemlocks. Yeah, those are 8 Canadian hemlocks that we've planted along that entire right-of-way there. I also want to make a point that last fall, Ian's team planted additional screening over here, so not even part of what we're talking about here, because we wanted additional screening. So I just want to make it clear that we want screening. We've planted additional screening. The reason there's these openings here is frankly because the trees have to have sunlight to continue to grow over time. I would like them to be bigger, but it is where it is. I also want to make the point that, to be clear again, if you look back here where there's this table here, and you look between these trees here, this is the original historic driveway that was part of the landscaping, part of the path going back to the building in the back. So it used to curve in front of the home here, and there were some oaks right here. It curved around and then went down, and part of what we're trying to do, again, is as well to make sure we keep that open as part of the historic nature of the home, in addition to having the usability of that drive.
You referred to that original driveway several times. I assume that as part of the construction of the underground garage, you tore out all of the original driveway.
Yes, so the original, I don't know if you've got a photo of from the front, maybe that's a little bit, or I've got so the original drive was in the same drive here, and it went up, just slightly upslope, and then there was a round parking pad here, and then there was a rectangular separate 2-car garage right here, just sandwiched in front of the house about 10 feet ahead. So you would pull in and then pull into the 2-car garage. And then it separately, this was a big circular pad, nothing in between, just hard gravel material. And then there was a single car lane that sort of went around the corner here. I guess maybe to make sure this is clear as well, there is not an ability to park on top of the garage. The garage doesn't have support structures underneath. It's concrete, precast concrete that spans the length of the drive. So you technically can't put that weight on the surface. If there's any question about ability to park up in here somewhere.
And there's no way it could be reinforced to support the parking?
Not that I'm aware. It'd be a big undertaking to go and do. And the reason the garage is the size it was as well, so it fits 2 cars in on this side, we had to be able to back up in the garage to be able to get out of the garage. So one of the comments Ian made about delivery drivers and whatnot, if you park right here on the concrete pad that's there to go into the driveway, it's fine because you can get in and out. It's relatively flat. It doesn't have much slope to it. The moment you pull down, so like past that line, so even if you're halfway past, you're down the slope, it's a steep slope. Unfortunately, we were working with a really tight lot line here, as you guys can see. We were trying to preserve a tree here and a lot of trees. And the result is it would be incredibly difficult to get FedEx truck, any sort of vehicle back up. I mean, even a sedan to back it up is incredibly difficult out of the drive, which is why you have to have that larger garage in the basement. And also because, again, we didn't have any mechanicals for the home. We put them down here in the garage.
Member Zaransky.
Have you considered anything a little bit more subtle, like a single car kind of pad for, this bonus type of spot you're looking for?
So the space, and Ian, maybe you have better dimensions, but we've basically got it so it's just as tight as you can possibly get. You can very closely fit 2 cars next to each other the way we've laid it out, but honestly speaking, it's tighter than what's even here right now.
Ian Wagon, landscape architect. The picture you're seeing here is probably an extra 8 feet wider than what we're proposing. So if you could imagine pinching in 2 to 3 feet on either side of where this mulch pathway is, that would be what we're looking for, is 20 feet deep, 16 feet wide. It's basically 2 stalls parked as close as you can get it while still being able to open a car door.
Right, but how about 10 by 16? Does that not?
You'd still run into the same problem, pretty much. Again, it's that back corner. If we push the parking pad forward to be compliant with the code, those oak trees, if you go back to that photo, Patrick, those 2 oak trees you see right in front would have to be cut down, and then the pad would have to be pushed forward to take the place of those oak trees to make sure that the back tire of the car does not infringe on the right-of-way. So our challenge was, do we ask for a variance to be able to preserve those 2 30-inch old-growth oak trees, or do we cut them down, rip them out, replace the inches somewhere else to get the extra 5 feet that we need to park a car? That was in my opinion, it was a better solution for everybody to preserve those oak trees and to have that parking pad where it is.
More question, Chair?
Member
So are
Zaransky.
these actually heritage trees, or you're just?
Yes.
So has forestry commented, staff?
They did actually I'm not staff, but I'm.
No?
Forestry did have comments.
was on.
They approved it based on the tree care recommendations.
Sorry, Patrick. It was in one of the.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah,
I mean, there's diameters on the civil, if you can point them out.
That's, it just says forestry has no objections,
correct. To the plans that were submitted, forestry has no objections.
and they've reviewed whether or not they're heritage trees.
I mean, I assume that they have, yes. I personally, at this moment, do not know if they were denoted as heritage trees. It's just because since they were not proposed being torn down, and
Okay.
they had no objection.
I'm not up to the code, probably to the extent you guys are, but I do not believe they are heritage definition. I think the heritage definition, it's dependent upon type of tree. I think we might have one heritage tree on the property, but they are, yeah.
The
18-inch
white oak, 15-inch, it's all white and red oak.
Okay, that should, and the size is not,
I thought they were big.
yeah, you said 30, which is what sent our antennas off.
No, but they are some of the larger trees we have left on the
Okay.
property. Unfortunately, we lost a huge red oak last year that fell from a storm. It was part of the reason we did the design the way we did originally, but it would be a shame to lose more oaks, frankly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. And you've been sworn in already, so just if you'll provide your name for the record.
Richard Becker Architects in Highland Park. Could I ask you to, hi Carl, could I ask you to bring the PDF back to the overhead that had the red line on it that shows that one? I want to just point out a couple of things on this exhibit that haven't been really talked about tonight. And it's the width of that apron that is being proposed that goes into beach. That's an extraordinarily wide, mammoth kind of opening to the street. That's pretty unparalleled. You do not see that in Highland Park, something that broadens that quickly. And that, in fact, that's part of the variation. I believe that's one of the things that they're getting relief for because of the width of it. I believe that was in the notice.
Yes, but that's not something the ZBA's.
Okay,
Because that's
so we
city
shouldn't be
council.
talking about it tonight, although it's part of the packet.
It's part of the packet,
Okay.
but city council.
Well, I just think it's important to point out because not only is the side that's on the city right-of-way being used as parking in this scenario, because it looks like it's de facto parking, it's basically part of that rectangle, it's on the other side of that red line. So that hasn't been talked about either. And also, I'm also going to point out that our firm designs commercial and buildings where it's routine that we would have on any of our parking facilities, no matter what municipality we're working in. Those buffers are looked at very seriously, and they're rarely waived, even in commercial areas. Not to mention, this is a residential area. So the idea that parking buffer would just be put aside, and not only just put aside, but actually parking put in its place. Forget about the fact that the buffer is not going to exist and that the parking's going to be there. Parking's going to be on the other side of the property line in this exhibit. It's on the city right away. That's really extraordinary. And I think that has to be thought about here. I think the design was very well intentioned with the underground structure. I really think I understand how we got to this point with this design path, and it's unfortunate, but I don't think the fact that it went this way is a rationale for kind of putting aside all these zoning restrictions that are there to protect people in Highland Park. I don't feel like the argument is there for it. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on this matter this evening? Not seeing any. I will begin to my left this time. Member Trishansky.
Sure. In looking at all the variations, I think it's pretty clear that there is no possible way to get around the fact that the hardship and the reason why we're here today is because of the underground parking garage, which was put in by the applicant. And so, I mean, to me, that's the sole reason why they need the parking pad, or why they're requesting the parking pad. So, putting aside all the issues with aesthetics and the neighbor complaints, I just can't get around the fact that the parking garage is the main reason for the request for this variance, and I just can't get around it. So I would recommend no.
Thank you. Member Yablon.
I agree with Member Trushansky, sorry, speaking issues, that I don't see any way around that this was inadvertently, of course, created, but it was created specifically because of the previous decision. So I would have to say no if we were voting on it. Passing it.
Thank you. Member Beck.
Well, I have to agree that the hardship was self-created, and that alone is a necessary and sufficient condition to deny the application. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Member Zaransky.
I don't really have much more to add. I mean, we're unfortunately bound by these standards, and I tend to agree with everything that was just said.
Thank you. Member Hendrick.
Yeah, I really, just not worth spending time on the other standards, because the hardship was created by, again, inadvertently, and so we are bound by the standards. I will say City Council has the ultimate vote on it, but based on what's before us right now that we have to decide on based on the standards, I would have to recommend against it.
Thank you. Member Bay.
Yeah, kind of feels like piling on at this point, but I think it was somewhat telltale early on, and I think it was Member Hendrick who asked the question, how do we get around that standard with the hardship was created by someone with a proprietary interest currently in the property, and the applicant's response was, I don't know. And I don't know either. I don't think you can get around that standard.
Thank you. I'm going to agree with my colleagues. I think that is the one standard that is impossible at this point to get around. I would also add, not to pile on some more, I lived a dozen years on Green Bay Road. There's no parking on Green Bay from Lake Cook Road to north of Central. So the inability to park outside of your house is not a hardship. We had to send the entire swim team to park on Kimball Drive because that was the only place for 20 some odd kids to come to a swim team party at our house. So unfortunately, the fact that it's difficult to park on your street, on Beach, or the neighboring streets, that's unfortunately just life and would probably have to go before the Transportation Committee or Advisory Group to change the parking regulations. I also understand that, I my former house in Green Bay had a front yard parking pad. And I'll admit, previous owners built it. It was a great convenience. The ability to come in on the same floor as your kitchen versus having to chug, in our case, from the back garage to the kitchen was a great convenience. So I really do see that what you're asking for is you haven't shown there's a demonstrable and unusual hardship, but that you're really trying to do something that ends up being more of a convenience. And with that, I apologize, but I just don't see there's a way forward with this at this time.
The only thing I'd like to add is, to me aesthetically, a paved parking pad looks a lot better than wood chip. I don't know if we can't take that into consideration, but I think that actually fits better with the neighborhood than this wide, expansive wood chips. But that one standard, we can't get around.
And I'll add on, we had a fence in front of our parking pad. To me, a fence is safer. The problem with, shrubs or whatever is at some point in time they grow higher than your car window and you've got a teenager leaving the driveway. So I actually wish City Council would say you could do a fence or shrubbery to block that parking pad. Because shrubbery, when they get to 4 feet to 5 feet tall, by the exit of a driveway, is sort of dangerous, in my opinion. So with that, I guess I would ask, how we'd like to proceed. Do we wish to ask staff to create a finding of fact representing our findings?
I
So
would,
the question would be that we recommend not approving this variance.
Yes.
A quick question for Carl, Manager.
Yes.
Regarding moving the pad closer to the house, would obviously involve taking down 2 trees, which you don't want to have to take down, but if the applicant decided to go that route, would they still need approval from either, a recommendation from either us and/or approval from city council to do so? Because of the apron?
Probably, yes. It depends on their revisions. It depends how far back they moved it. Well, yeah, we'd have to see the revisions,
Sure.
but they would have to move it back 10 feet to not need the zoning variation. And Chair, if I could just make a quick comment about
Yes.
the board. So the board has several options right now. So one, you could offer the applicant a chance for continuance to see if they come back with revisions or anything to another meeting. Of course, the board, that's up to the board.
I wasn't sure if that had to go through city council.
Well, we'll eventually have to go to city council.
Okay.
But right now, it's at the Board of Appeals.
Okay.
Zoning Board of Appeals. And then the other thing in terms of the board's recommendation, whenever the board does, come down, vote on a recommendation, have a recommendation, that'll be transmitted to the city council by findings of fact. And staff can either draft those and just send them there, or staff can also draft them and bring them also to the next meeting in 2 weeks, so that way the board can actually see them. I know we've had what I feel like is pretty good feedback on the self-created hardship. Of course, there are 7 other findings as well. The board is correct if they don't meet one. It's a recommendation for denial, but there are 7 other findings as well, and in order for staff to draft those, we might just want to hear a little more feedback on whether all of them except that one are met, or there's multiple that aren't met.
so you mean from all of us?
Well, however the board wants to handle it. It's just, again, we want to transmit something, and I just want to make sure we transmit it correctly, because I just want to make sure we capture the board's intent. Was it that 7 were met, but 1 wasn't? I mean, I know I heard the chair suggest that perhaps in the chair's opinion, 2 weren't met, but I don't know if that's the will of the board necessarily. And so, again, we can bring those findings back 2 weeks from now as well, if the board's interested in seeing those and wanting to adopt them
I
as
think the
well.
appropriate finding of fact at this point, Carl, is that we have gotten to one threshold and said clearly it doesn't meet that threshold, and we're not going to consider the other ones.
Yeah, I think.
That could, the board, that can be a board recommendation.
If the council wants our
That can-
input,
yes.
they can ask for it.
Yes, I think that could be a board recommendation, yes.
And I think that's how I was planning on making the motion, if we end up making a motion.
In that case, then staff would not attempt to transmit findings on the other 7. Staff would only transmit just that, whatever's in the motion and is adopted.
We can ask.
I'm confused, yeah, because if you just go with that one threshold, it seems to me, but I could be wrong, more reasonable to address all of the pieces. What if council feels that, that one threshold isn't a hurdle for them? It just seems, that's my question. I'm trying to understand that.
I would take the position that if and only if council was to decide that one threshold, which seems to be of most importance to us, is not a hurdle for the council, they could certainly ask our opinion on the other.
On the other, and then just go back.
But to go through all of them
Yeah,
at this
yeah.
point, it seems like a total waste of time.
Okay.
And I wonder if that's even possible, because it seems strange to me that you could refer something to the zoning board and then say, we would like you to ignore one of the standards for granting a variation. But I agree. I think having it kicked back, if possible, would be the way to go, if
Right.
that's what city council wanted.
That makes sense to me. I just wanted clarification on how that would work. Okay, thank you.
Ask one question. Just procedurally, I'm just more so curious. How does this get referred to zoning? Was this debated at the?
You have to ask Carl this.
Okay, so I was wondering if this was debated at the meeting, or if this.
I don't recall this being since my tenure, and I'm very new.
Like, how does the referral get made to the zoning board?
I
from
think it was a
council?
previous council that made the referral.
I'm sorry, there's multiple people.
When was the referral from city council to us made? Is part of the question.
August 21st.
August 21st, so it was made by your
It
council.
was. Okay, I'm sorry, I
Okay,
didn't remember.
so city council under the Compare rule, and Compare was a city attorney years ago, there's a stone out front with his name on it, came up with this rule that on certain issues, city council had domain, but they could refer it to the ZBA for recommendation.
Sure. So was there discussion about, should this be a referral, should this not be a referral? Like, what triggers a referral?
Oh, so there's 14 enumerated types of variations the zoning board can consider. 13 of those are just specifically listed, like setbacks and floor area. And so if somebody asks for that type of request, it just comes here by operation of the code. But there's it's the 13th one out of 14th. There's a kind of a catch-all, so to speak, where if somebody asks for something else in the zoning code that's not those other 13, they have a chance for that, but it has to go to the city council first, just because that's what the code says. It has to go to the city council first. And the city council can either not refer it, which is a denial, can refer to the zoning board of appeals for a public hearing and a recommendation back to the city council, which is what's been done in this case, perhaps because of the other code elements also involved as well. Or thirdly, they can refer it to the zoning board of appeals for a public hearing and a final decision. And then in cases where it goes back to the city council, the zoning board has transmitted their recommendation via, this is just what was done in the past, by findings of fact for all the 8 standards of approval.
Thank you.
Sir, you had...
Yeah, Ian Wagon again. Someone had asked the question, if we were to push back the parking pad 10 feet, would we still need to apply for a variance? And the problem is that, as you can see on this map, where that red line crosses is where those concrete walls start. So no matter what, we would have to expand beyond the 18-foot width, no matter what we put in there, in order to even get around that wall. And that's where we were talking about the width of the apron. The curb cut is not changing. It's the width at the property line is only allowed to be 18 feet, and the parking pad is 16 feet wide, the other driveway is 12 feet wide, but because of how it falls on the property line and the existence of those 2 concrete walls, we have to start that branch before the property line by about a foot. And that's where that width comes in. So there would, under all circumstances, in order to access anywhere else on the property, we would need variation on that particular rule.
Okay, thank you. And ma'am, you had raised your hand.
Just wanted to mention, I don't know if you're going to have just one or talk about others of those standards that aren't met, but I think that the issue of convenience, of it being a question of convenience as opposed to a hardship and necessity, also might be something that if the city council asks, we would ask the board to raise that as well.
Thank you. Yes. If my colleagues agree.
Correct.
If my colleagues agree.
So I don't think my colleagues agree on that, so I'm not going to make a motion that includes that. I would currently make a motion that directs staff to draft a findings of fact recommending denial based on the standards not being met, specifically the alleged hardship has not been created by any person presently having a proprietary interest in the subject property. And maybe it's possible to add something to the, if city council would like to kick it back to us to weigh in on the other standards and give our more detailed thoughts on that, maybe we can do that. But that's how I would direct the findings of fact. Carl, is that okay to direct it that way?
If that's what if that's what the zoning board of appeals wants, that is fine. Again, you can address all the 8 standards, or if you find it sufficient that one's not met and that's your recommendation, then that would be the will of the zoning board of appeals.
Are
would second
That's a
that motion.
I would second.
So there's a motion by Member Hendrick with a second by Vice Chair Bay to deny the request for a variance based, the recommendation to recommend that City Council deny the variance based on the alleged hardship has not been created by any person presently having a proprietary interest in the subject property, reminding City Council that the applicant received a variance from this board in 2018 and thereby effectively created the hardship they're asking for a variance of. We will take a roll call when Carl catches up.
Member Trashansky?
Aye.
Member Beck?
Aye.
Member Yablon?
Aye.
Member Zaransky?
Aye.
Member Hendrick?
Aye.
Vice Chair Bay?
Aye.
Chair Kaufman?
Aye. Thank you. We apologize, but thank you for coming before us this evening. I would imagine you'll have the opportunity to speak before City Council.
Right. Chair, may I just comment on that?
Yes.
Okay, so this item, it wasn't continued, so it's not going to come back to the Zoning Board of Appeals, so this item will now go to the City Council. There's no mailed notice requirement for the City Council, so if any of you are interested in the audience about the City Council date, you should follow up with Patrick Hoffman Friday or Monday. It's not going to go to the City Council meeting this Monday on the 11th, I can tell you that right now. So you can follow up with Patrick, and he will provide you the date for that City Council meeting date.
Are we able to obtain versions?
You can submit new information, yes. It's still an active
To
application.
be honest, we did not solicit.
Okay. That brings us to the staff report.
I wanted to say one thing, an apology, that it may be silly to utter this apology to Commissioner Zaransky, that we had no meeting, only one meeting in August, so we had a 1,000-page packet for August 21st, followed by nearly 1,000-page packet for the PDC meeting the next day on August 22nd, as you are all aware, I think. And I apologize that I did not remember this one piece of it. I just wanted to apologize.
No,
The compare-
sir. I was just
compare
looking for
referral.
clarification on how
Yeah.
the whole procedure works.
We are the only community in the nation that uses this procedure. That's why it's named for him. Patrick.
Yes, so the next two items were just the work plan for the coming up year for ZBA. This is just the budget for ZBA for 2024, and then the next one was the proposed meeting dates. They've been cross-checked with holidays to remove any that conflicted. So we just need the board's approval on these two items.
I'm assuming that the commissioner recognition line item is more for signing documents and things that are, honorariums as opposed to installing like facial software where it would actually recognize us as we walk in and out of the chamber.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
Just wanted to clarify that. And also wonder why it's such an exorbitant amount.
I haven't seen any cake since I've been here.
That's right.
Nicole's gone.
I didn't make the budget, I'm not sure.
Make a motion to approve the work plan and the schedule?
I would also say I also went through the packet and looked at the dates, and I think they covered everything.
Yes.
You want to approve them one at a time or collectively?
We can do them collectively. I only have one here to sign, so.
I would second the motion.
So that was a motion by member Beck with a second by member Hendrick to adopt the 2024 Zoning Board of Appeals work plan, as well as the resolution setting the schedule of regular meetings of the Zoning Board of Appeals of the City of Highland Park, Illinois. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Anybody abstaining? Hearing none, that has passed unanimously. That brings us to miscellaneous items, and there's one thing that Patrick and Carl and I have been communicating with this week, and I want to give you forewarning, it will be on the next agenda so that you can just think about it, and that is City Council, the Zoning Board of Appeals, or not the Zoning Board, the Plan and Design Commission, other city bodies limit the time that members of the public speaking on an item, either for or against, have, other than the applicant. The applicant, it is their job to make the case. The question is whether or not the zoning board wishes to adopt some sort of time limit for members of the public other than the applicant. So between now and the next meeting, I want you all just think about it so that we can have a robust discussion and decide if that's somewhere we would like to go.
Is that including part of the applicant's team or?
No, the applicant and
their
his,
team would
and
be
his,
exempt?
yeah, they would be exempt.
So the entire team, so if they had a tree guy, if they had.
Exactly, they need to prove that they meet the requirements of the variance. So they get the time they are required like they do before PDC. The question, then PDC as well as City Council gives everyone a 3-minute limit. I just want us to be on the record one way or another if this is the approach we would like to take in order to try to streamline some of our meetings, or whether or not we like the open free-for-all that we have sometimes. So think about it, be prepared to discuss. If you wish to make points, be my guest. No, let's keep opinions.
I think when it's normally an issue, it's
Or his attorney.
correct. 100% exactly what I'm thinking of.
As a non-attorney.
100%.
So that will be on the next agenda. And Carl and I discussed, and we both believe that it needs to be actually on the agenda before we discuss it, so that if there are members of the public or their attorneys who wish to make a comment on this item, they've been forewarned.
That makes sense.
With that, if does anybody have anything else? Councilwoman?
Nothing, I really, this is quite genuine. I appreciate the conversation. I think you ask good questions, and I think it's very educational. Thank you.
Thank you. In that case, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Remember, you have 1 more second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We are hereby adjourned at 9:38 PM.